Welcome to the Defence Connect podcast with your host, Phil Tarrant.
Oh, good day, everyone. Riccardo Bosi is here. He's from an organisation called Lionheart, and Ricardo also has a background in the army for many, many years. Ricardo, how are you going? Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Phil. Good to be here.
What do you think about this noise? A lot of leaders in business get swept up in all the noise, the influencing factors, which isn't really supporting them to get the job done, but they concentrate on. Is that a typical challenge and issue you see from leaders across business?
Yeah, it is. And the planning system that we learn in the military is superb, because when I consult to major corporates, I just say one word and it clarifies. End state. What's your end state? If the action you are taking contributes to that end state, you go ahead. If it doesn't, you quit. Just move on to something else. So
what's the skills then, do you think, to actually always focus on the end state rather than get caught up with all the other stuff that doesn't really matter?
Well, the trick is to make sure you spend, as Abraham Lincoln said, spend most of your time sharpening the axe, getting it right. So I was consulting to a medical firm recently, and setting the intention, purpose, method, end state was what I spent most of my time doing, defining in very clear detail exactly what each director around the table wanted. And then we beat that into shape and presented them with an intention, purpose, method, end state, very clear. Presented that to the chief executive to then turn into a strategic plan, and that clarifies, and they can see their words up on the wall and they can see their objectives being achieved.
And a lot of the work that you do as an organisation like that, does it come from your military background? Do you translate a lot of learnings and skills and capabilities you had as an officer in the Australian Army into try and turn into a corporate strategy or sophistication to actually help people leverage their business as a result of that? Is that the mantra?
Absolutely. The fundamental skills were learnt in the military, but they don't necessarily apply neatly straight into business. I started my first company in 98. I was yet to retire for 6 years. So I was running business on weekends and night times, and at the desk saluting the boss during the week. And what I learned was that there are some fundamental differences between the two, and you have to massage one into the other. Business is far more complex, far more mobile than defence, and you have less reliability in terms of people and systems. And so you've got to think quickly and move fast. But massaging the two into one process is what has underpinned my success in the corporate world. Sharp, hard, measurable processes from defence, but adapted for civilian life, which is fundamentally different.
Can you tell us a little bit about your career in the Army? It was sort of a couple of decades or so. What sort of stuff were you working on?
Sure. I spent 24 years in the Army as a commissioned officer, reached the rank of Lieutenant Colonel, most of that time in Special Ops, in the Specialised Service Regiment, the 1st Commando Regiment, 2 stints in Headquarters Special Operations in the Capability Development Branch, which was just a buzz, Future Warfare Development, and a number of other jobs, as you do, staff jobs in Headquarters, Mechanised Battalion, Light Infantry. So a good spread of technical and staff skills.
And can you tell us a little about the transition out of the Army into the corporate world? I know it is an end game and an end state for most people that go through the services. There is a life after the services. Was always a plan for you to spend your time in the Army and then explore opportunities outside of it, and then was it an easy transition out of the Army? It
was for me. It was quite lucky. Like most people, I was planning to become a general, and then I realised there was a very exciting life outside. And so 6 years before I actually retired, I didn't know when I was going to retire, but I knew I would. And I had a choice between going into a large corporate entity or just learning business from the ground up by starting businesses. So I took the second option. I got some basic training in how to run a business, and then I just started a number of companies with colleagues and investors just to learn how to do business. Each one was a sound business in its own right, but it fell over for any number of reasons, and that was part of the learning process.
And if you had to crystallise those lessons you learned during that period of time to transition out of the Army and start creating your own businesses, what are the 2 or 3 critical factors to get right for success?
I can give you one.
What is it?
It's all about people. See, in defence, other people train our people for us, and within a very narrow band of competency, they'll be able to do the job. In the civilian world, you don't have that certainty. So I learned very quickly, you can have a second-class business idea, but with a first-class team, and you have a chance to make it big. You can have a first-class business idea with a second-class team, and you won't make $1. It's all about people. And that's why I focus on leadership now, because most organisations have most of what they need to get the job done, but unless they get the people part right. And that's what leadership's about, because military understand command, which is the lawful execution of your authority. And that's part of leadership. It's a subset of leadership. Real leadership comes from within you. And I've got my own definition, and it took me years to actually nail it down. But I eventually ended with one that I'm pretty happy with. And a real leader is someone who, using nothing but what they are, unites many to achieve good. And each word is very carefully selected. That's real leadership. Now, in the real world, I understand that you need to encourage, coerce, force, manipulate, entice. This is the real world. But as long as you know how far you're drifting from the true path, let's say, that's okay. Just don't spend too much time down there forcing and manipulating people. That's not leadership. That's something else. You get the job done, but that's not leadership. And real leadership pays in the short, medium and long term in any business. That's the other thing I've learned about it.
And transitioning leadership skills, the application of leadership within the Army into the corporate world, what would be the key leadership trait of someone who is ex-Army, who transitions into corporate, that a corporate could learn?
Bibi Netanyahu said it, patience. Absolute patience. You must learn patience. Most military people for the first year or three are having difficulty understanding it's a different world, and it just takes time. And what your job is as a leader, because you will have skills, most military people have skills that the civilian world loves, but they can't deliver it the way the civilian world likes. So if they learn that they have this ability to share their knowledge, their experience with their colleagues, it'll get them a long way down the track. But patience, that's the big one.
What would be, if you put that the other way around, what would be great leaders in the corporate world that don't have any military bearing or experience? What could the services, what can the Army and Navy and Air Force learn from those corporate leaders to do better within the context of a command and control structure within the military?
They're pinned on results. The corporate world is very clear on their KPIs, and it's not about turning up. Unless you're getting a result, you're out of a job. There are many organisations in the military where you turn up and you don't actually achieve anything, but you've got a nice resume that says, I was the, and fill in the blank. But the corporate world's not interested in where you served and what position you held. They are interested in the results you achieved. And that's what the corporate world has it over the military. The only time the military gets really measured is in war. But even then, because there is a political dimension to it, the politicians won't necessarily admit error. But a hard adherence to a set of KPIs. And we get back to this end state, military strategic end state. Way back when in Canberra, it was unusual for us to put together a series of military strategic end states to present to government. And these were the conditions which constituted success for an operation. They would sign off on it and away we went. And as soon as those conditions were met, the operation was done. Without that, military can get away with all sorts of nonsense.
And they still do today like they have done always?
Absolutely.
Do you see that changing over time?
Not until there's political change.
And well, then there's no shortage of political change right at the moment. I don't know who our Prime Minister is. I blink and it's always very different, but we'll touch on it a little bit later. I know you've been doing a lot of work and you do a lot of presentations with and working with corporates, the 5 pillars of real leadership. What are those 5 pillars, and can you crystallise each of them in a quick sentence for us?
Absolutely. It's imagine you're building a building. The first one is it's the foundation. So this is one of the pillars. This is the foundation, the slab you put down, and everything rests on this, and that's trust. Without trust, you have nothing, any relationship. And leadership is about people. And trust is easy to define. Be honest. Just tell the truth. Be competent. Know your job. Be measured. Be candid. And be loyal. And the last one's interesting. Be loyal to an ideal. Don't be loyal to people, because people are variable. They're changeable. But be loyal to an ideal. So that's the foundation. And then the first pillar is your character. And character, civilizations are built on character. The Roman Empire for the first 500 years was a republic. There was an underlying ethos, philosophy about how and what it was to be a Roman. Corruption set in, became part of the day-to-day life in Rome, and then the dictatorships took over, and they're on a 500-year slow road to oblivion. So the first pillar is character. The second pillar is competence. Know your job. Know your people. And you've really got to know your job deeply, well. You've got to understand people. You don't have to be a psychologist, but you have to understand psychology, because leadership is about people and people is about relationships. And an organisation is like an individual. It'll be cranky, it'll be happy, it'll be working hard, and it won't work at all. So you've got to understand people. The third pillar is invention. You've got to create something new, innovate. And there are simple ways to do it. This isn't some strange magical art. It's again hard and measurable, and the systems can be put in place. Now, you might not be a naturally inventive character. I wasn't. But that doesn't matter. You can apply systems that will help you come up with the first idea before the next guy, and that's all you need to do. The fourth pillar is empowerment, making sure that your people are better off for having worked with you and your organisation. There's an old saying, if I train my people, what if they leave? And the reply is, well, if you don't train them, what happens when they stay? Empower them in every possible way to make them better and therefore your organisation better. And the last pillar is you. And you is understanding who and what you really are. Most of us can do most things, but the trick is once you've found out who you really are on a deep level, then you find out where you belong on the planet. And the work you'll do won't be work ever again. You will apply effort, but it'll be a sheer joy every day to get up, apply effort and do what you were put here to do.
Do you think most people are able to do that fifth pillar, actually self-reflect, self-analyse and actually understand who they are and what they do and what makes them tick and what makes them good, what makes them competent? It's, for many, it doesn't come natural. So how do you, if you're one of those people, how do you actually go about orchestrating that?
Well, you'll have to attend one of my seminars. but it's a good question because most people are actually self-reflective, even if they come across as bombastic and overly confident, arrogant. Under the right circumstances, with the right information, they start to realise, guess what, there's a better version of me waiting to come out. I was in some contract negotiations recently with an American chief executive, and he thought he was just being a hard businessman. In fact, he was being a bit of a goose. He didn't know how to pull back and when to push and when to pull back. He's fine, but most people can. Most people reflect. Most people look in the mirror and go, I could have done better today. It's not that hard.
Do you find, and I've asked this question to a number of people who have served in the forces at a senior level, officer level as well, a certain sense of frustration dealing with leaders who don't have a military bearing or military experience. How would you rate corporate leaders in general around how they go about executing their jobs and showing that leadership, someone who hasn't got that background? Do you think it's lacking? You know, is corporate Australia missing out for not having those skills and capabilities that's taught in the military?
Absolutely. Time and time and time again. I'll attend or I'll put on a presentation for, say, the board of a major corporation. And you can see in their faces they don't want to be there because, you know, I am a leader. I don't need you. What are you doing here? And by the end of the session, their eyes are wide and they've gone, that was fantastic. I've learnt more about, here's a quote, I've learnt more about myself in the last 3.5 hours than I have in my entire life. Given the right instruction on leadership, Australian businesses could take off like never before. It's just they haven't been taught. And let's face it, I had to write my own book on this because the military doesn't know leadership. As I said, military knows command. But I'm a simple soldier, so I like to simplify everything to its core elements. And that's why, as I said, there's a foundation and 5 pillars. Everything comes under that. And if you apply that on a daily basis and begin to live it, you become a better person, your company becomes a better company, the country becomes a better country. We've got a ton of capability here in Australia. We have everything we need, physical resources, cultural resources, financial resources, natural resources. The one thing that we are really missing is leadership because I've travelled the world, I've consulted all around the planet, and we overstate our capabilities, we really do. If we could pick up our leadership game, we would genuinely punch above our weight. We like to think that we do, but we don't, but we genuinely could.
Who should Australian corporates, Australian businesses be looking to emulate? Who does it well, do you think, globally? Who creates the best leaders in the corporate world?
It depends on what you're after because Jack Welch and GE was a classic some years back and he did some fantastic work with GE. But the real trick to it is to study everyone but make up your own mind. It was like when my wife was pregnant for the first time, I said, darling, listen to everybody, believe nobody. You have to, this is your journey. Nobody can do this for you. You have to make up your own mind and see what works. That's what Australian businesses have to do. Look at everyone. But for goodness sake, make up your own mind, go your own way. Now, you'll make mistakes or you'll succeed, and you probably will do both. But by learning that process, you'll develop your own means because, I am a very different individual to you, Phil. How you would lead, even though we would apply the same principles, we would do it differently. We have to find out who we are, apply it, try it, and away you go. Let me give you an example. It's like asking, what sort of chief executive are you? Are you a strategist? Do you see where you are and you can see a route to where you want to go? Or are you a manager? You love just getting the systems in place so it flows smoothly. Or are you an innovator? And you're bored witless with the mechanics of it, but just can't wait to find the brand new next best thing. It doesn't matter. Any one of us can be in that leadership role. As long as you know who you are and where you naturally fit, you can then surround yourself with the other people that you need to complement the whole team. Businesses are the same. Look globally, but make your own mind up and do stuff. Start trying. Succeed, fail, move on. Dust yourself off. There's an old Japanese proverb. I love it. I stuck it on my son's notice board. He's doing his HSC this year. Fall 7 times, stand up 8. And as you know, that's the basis to success. The one thing every successful individual or corporation has in common is persistence.
Your 5 pillars of leadership, how long has it taken you to actually crystallise those into 5 very simple words that make a lot of sense, and people can interpret them as they will and do. But did it take a while to actually flesh it out and crystallise it in that way?
It took 40 years in the business world and in the military to experience it, so I could draw upon it. To actually get it down on paper, a couple of years.
And do you need to get all 5 of them spot on to be a good leader, or if you get 1 or 2 of them right and have some shortcomings in the other ones, you're still doing okay?
Well, let me answer this way. When you go to Macca's and you order a Big Mac, do you want 2 all-beef patties, special sauce, lettuce, cheese, pickles, onions on a sesame seed bun, or do you give the 2 all-beef patties a miss and get some extra sauce there? The whole package has to be there. Otherwise, you'll be disappointed.
And do you find that you come across or you consult with people that have all 5, or, is it, you're never going to get there, I imagine. It's always something you're working towards. If you stop and think that, okay, I've achieved the Holy Grail here, I've got all 5 and I don't need to do anything more, you're probably not a good leader, right? So know where you struggle on, because I can't imagine you can't be great at all those 5. I think you're probably going to have to be working all of them.
No, it's not true. Of course you are. You start where you are. And it's like any company that has a series of 5 different metrics. And you're doing well on 4, and if you see you're not doing well on the 5th one, that's where you work on. You get more value for money investing in that one you're not performing on. But you've got to be all 5. But here's the thing. The best leaders I've bumped into and I've worked with and I've counselled and coached, the ones who score best on all of those 5 are the most humble. No, I don't mean humble in the sense of I'm not very good. You don't think less of yourself. You just think of yourself less. There's a big difference. You can be extremely powerful and still have a ton of humility to understand that everyone's on their journey. And so you have that patience I was talking about earlier. When you see someone struggling and they might be even a bit rude or abrupt, and you recognise yourself in an earlier life in them and you know how to bring them around and say, look, you don't need to be like that. It's okay. You're good at what you do. Let's just finesse this a little bit.
Interesting. So the third point you spoke about was invention.
Yep.
Invention is critical to, pretty much everything. And when you look at the defence industry right now, all those programs that I spoke about really early on, Australian business have a reputation for innovation. And if you look at some of the great wins of Australian innovation, you can count many of them. But it's something that needs to be perpetually worked at. Innovation. You have the connectivity between some great academic minds and the commercialisation of those ideas in the defence space with some major primes who are forming some great partnerships. But this culture of innovation, you said that we could do it a lot better than what we can do right now. And I think we're going to need to, when you look at the capability building sense for defence industry, in order to maintain the advantage that we have. F-35, for example, coming online, we've got to keep changing and evolving it, otherwise we're going to be left behind. So how can Australian defence businesses be better, do you feel, at innovation?
Okay, there's 2 ways to do it. I was not naturally an innovative person as your typical military officer, well trained in a very specific set of processes, but that blinds you to alternatives. So when I became the SAJ 58 at Special Ops Command, which is the Director of Capability Development, Future Warfare Development, I within 2 months of the job, I got frustrated with both regiments coming and giving me problems that required better ways to deliver kinetic energy. Let's improve the safety catch. And I thought, give me a break. We're on the cusp of the 21st century. This is 1998. The space station, International Space Station, was about to be launched, and we're still figuring out how to shoot 20-cent pieces. And so I pulled my team aside and said, look, in 20 years, and this is 1998, in 20 years I want the Special Ops Group to look back at us and wonder how we knew back then what we needed today. Now, this is the holy grail for innovation. This is the big approach to innovation. So what we did was 18 months, I didn't ask for any permission. I asked for no additional resources or funding. I didn't tell the commander we were doing it because I knew he wouldn't get it. And in less than 18 months, we came up with a world first. We created this process where government could give us a vague motherhood and apple pie statement. And in an auditable, transparent and logical process, we could tell them exactly where to invest their priorities. And it would give them a very measurable capability. That's the big stuff. That sort of innovation requires particular types of people. Very few people like that. I was lucky I had a team, by good luck and good management, that I managed to pull together. Very difficult people, even for military people, because they were very imaginative. And that sort of mercurial brilliance is hard to contain, and you don't want to contain it, but you need to guide and control. And so that first approach to innovation is to get genuinely bright people who live and breathe innovation. They just see the world differently to us. And then through a process of giving them that end state and guiding their movement towards it, you'll come up with the most amazing stuff. In fact, what we came up with, we showed the UK Ministry of Defence, and they'd had 1,000 people working on this for 5 years. I had 3 for 18 months. They looked at our work and said, we're nowhere near where you are. US Space Command took one look and said, where do we sign up? We want it now, because they had nothing like it either. So that's the big picture stuff, and that requires very specific, innovative people. Now, here's a test to see whether you're an innovator or not, and I'll make fun of myself so you'll get the message. When I was a kid, you had one flavour of chips, Smith's Crisps, plain, that was it. Then they introduced chicken and barbecue, and that was just revolutionary. And if you look in the shops now, you've got camembert and fig, Himalayan pink salt. And when they first started coming up with these flavours of chips, I laughed and went, this is stupid. What, how ridiculous. And then it occurred to me, if I can't examine a new packet of chips, how am I going to see an innovation opportunity? And the answer is, you won't, ever. So now I walk in, whenever I see something new, I say, I better try that because it's new. It opens up your eyes. It's a perspective. The second way to do it, and this is much easier, and everybody can do this immediately, every organisation on the planet. I was consulting to a major pizza chain, and I was sitting with the national sales manager and his state sales managers, and they had their heads in their hands, sad because they couldn't hit their targets. They had no idea what to do next. They just couldn't hit their targets. So I asked the national sales manager, how many people do you have in your organisation, including the delivery boys? And he said about 100,000. I said, good. You have an R&D department of 100,000. And he looked at me. And I said, imagine if every one of them submitted just one idea a month. Now, I'll guarantee that 99% of those ideas will be completely ridiculous. But what's 1% of 100,000? Oh, that's 1,000. I said, okay, so you get 1,000 market-busting ideas a month. Do you think you can outpace the competition just on that alone? And he got it. He's now writing furiously. The state sales managers, the penny started to drop and they went, got it. Let the team do the work. Draw all that energy up into your organisation. See, as a chief exec, you're not expected to come up with everything. But goodness sake, it's your job to get the best out of every individual there. And I'll bet you, if Australian industry simply did that, how can we do this better? They'll be in front before they know it.
So that example you used, which of the 5 pillars of leadership would that be drawing on, would you say?
That's invention.
That's
Number
invention.
3, invention. You've got to come up with something new. Now, there's 2 ways of new. There's new like never happened before, and that's great. That's tough, though. It's tough to get and tough to get to market. And there's a whole story on that I'll tell you another time. The other one is the Me Too. It's okay to be a Me Too company. You spot something, go, I'll have some of that, because all the hard work's been done. Imitate, change it slowly, make it your own. Now, the advantage of the Me Too is that anybody can do it. And if it's a new idea where you are, it's old somewhere else, it's first somewhere else, but where you are, it hasn't been done, it's a new idea. So introducing a new idea into your world that somebody else came up with is valid as well. So you can do both. Try to create something new or copy something new from somewhere else and introduce it for the first time into your market. You'll still do well.
So to give that some context for defence industry, there is a lot of people doing some innovative stuff right across the world, which isn't happening here in Australia. So, with the Australian government and the military looking to champion our local domestic capabilities, and as we work towards sort of sovereign industrial capabilities, there's probably a lot of new ideas that can be generated in Australia which are existing somewhere else. It just needs someone to have the understanding, the idea and the inventiveness to go out there and do that, which that's a fair point.
Absolutely. We used to, when I was part of the South Australian Government Defence Unit after I first retired, we would attend every defence expo we could. And we're in Singapore one year and we went in Amman, Jordan the next year. And you just bump into the same people and you get to know them and you get to, the old expression, cross-pollinate. You just see things that you haven't seen before and you bring it back home. Now, be aware, you can bring something back and your boss won't recognise it, and every innovator knows that feeling, I've got this great idea, have a look at this, and the eyes glaze over and they're not interested because they can't see its application. That interaction with others is critical. It's critical not only to innovation in defence companies, it's critical as people. You see those people who only bump around the same people all the time. There's nothing new in their lives. You've got to constantly mix with people. And internally, there's a couple of strategies you can apply. One is a bootlegging policy. Bootlegging is simply saying to your people, okay, look, I know you're a bunch of bright guys and girls. I will allow you a set amount of time, company time. You get no more resources, but you do get time. And I want you to come up with new stuff. So for the last hour of every Thursday, once a week, you can work on your own private little project and see what you can come up with. And that turns out great dividends because all of a sudden people realise, wow, I can actually sit here instead of pretending I'm working. I can actually work on this little idea. I'm sure we'll do good. The second thing you do, other than a bootlegging policy, is to have briefing sessions between interdisciplinary groups. And you explain to the other groups what you're up to, they explain what they're up to. And that synergy that sometimes flies out is quite unique. And if they know their objective is to identify a new business opportunity, that's what they will see with great clarity, but from a different perspective.
Talk about clarity. So, and you also mentioned a number of times this the end state. So, where do you want to be after going through a particular exercise or whatever it is? So, what we're talking there is about understanding the outcome of doing something in particular. So, what is your strategy and why you're doing that? Where you're going to be and why you want to be there. So, this point of the end state, I think that's something that a lot of businesses lack. They don't really know where they're going. If you're one of those businesses and you're tuning into this thinking, yes, we're doing the right things, yes, we're in the business all day, we're producing products, or we're looking to innovate, or we're looking to deliver X capability to defence industry, but you're not yet really too sure why you're doing it. You know sort of why you're doing it, but you're not really understand why you're doing it. How can you actually crystallise that? What would be a couple of those steps to do that?
If you've gone through the process of listing your intention, purpose, method, and end state, and you start with the end state, forget purpose and method. Method reveals itself, and purpose is something that encapsulates what you've driven at the bottom. In a year's time, I would like this organisation to have an EBIT of X, liabilities and assets of Y, and so you get hard measurables. Once you've done that, you wrap it all up and say, this is why we are here as a company. This isn't the vision that inspires everyone in the company, from the receptionist through to the logistics manager. This is board level, high level thinking. This is what we wanted to do. Now, why are we doing it? And it's a really good question, because if the why doesn't match, then you won't take a step forward. You'll turn up and you'll see a to-do list that you're just not interested in. Now, let me give you a personal example. And it took a while. My son asked me once, why do you do what you do, Dad? This is when I was in defence. That's a good question. And I've served in a number of regiments. I was in the Royal Australian Regiment, whose motto is duty first. Well, that doesn't tell me why. It tells me my priorities. That's good. I've served in the Special Air Service Regiment. Who dares wins? It tells me what sort of guy I've got to be, but it doesn't tell me why. I've been in the 1st Commando Regiment. Strike swiftly. It tells me how to do my job. It doesn't tell me why. And it wasn't until years later that, if you reflect back on your life, in my life, and I actually understood for the first time why I do what I do. And it's another motto from another organisation, but it's beautiful. It's so others may live. So that's my purpose. That's why I did what I did. How I did it can always change. The end state was always very clear. So describe the end state, forget method, describe the end state, and encapsulate it in a compelling statement about why you get up every morning to do this work. Now, if you can't fit into it, you're in the wrong job. Now, nothing wrong with doing a job that pays the bills. That's fine. But on a personal level and then on an organisational level, if you have that alignment, nothing will stop you.
So that evolves over time, and new experiences probably change the way in which you see the world. And for you, you've got quite a diverse range of skills through the experience that you've gotten at the moment with Lionheart. But by the way, why Lionheart? What's the genesis of that name?
Oh, because my father used to call me Riccardo Cuore de Leon. My father's Italian, and that's Richard the Lionheart. Okay. Became a self-fulfilling prophecy.
There you go. Nice. So this is, at the moment, it's working like. What's your why with what you're doing right now? Why are you doing this? Why are you working with corporate leaders to try and empower them to be better at what they do?
Yeah, it's another good question, because I had no intention of getting into this business. The why is simple. It is immensely gratifying to see people become more than they were. It's just fantastic. The way it started, in fact, was in 1998. I was asked, I just come back from Kuwait, and I was visiting a cadet down at the Defence Force Academy. He went to my school, and I was sort of keeping an eye on him to make sure things were okay. I bumped into one of the divisional commanders, and she said, do you mind giving the first-year cadets a talk on leadership? And I went, no, please don't, because I knew what military expected about leadership, and I didn't want to do that. And she insisted, so I relented, and I designed this talk on leadership. Halfway through it, I said something, and to this day I don't know what it was, but I said something, and 140 cadets were on their feet cheering and whistling and clapping. Now, you'll know the military. Military never has that sort of emotional response to any presentation. And I looked up and I went, wow, the marketplace is telling me something. There's something of value that I am doing here. So why am I doing this? It's immensely valuable to the marketplace. It pays extremely well. But most of all, it is immensely gratifying to see someone become more than they are today, because it's already in there. Everything you need is inside you right now. Everything you need is inside you right now. It just needs to come out, because nobody is born with all the rules. You're playing a game and you're not told the rules. You get some rules and you apply them and it doesn't work. And bumps and bruises, and you fall over and you get up and you work out roughly what works in life. But when you've got a better set of rules, you start doing better and you start becoming who you really are. And that's just fantastic.
So what's next?
For me?
Yeah.
Politics.
Okay. What's the rationale? What's the driver behind that?
I was in the Middle East for 5 years. I was an advisor to the United Arab Emirates Special Operations Command, doing a lot of good work there, high-level strategy, capability development, as well as training up teams for operations in Afghanistan. So we trained them up and took them to the Afghan, and they did well. And once again, leadership. We achieved things with those guys that nobody achieved before, and they said, mate, you'll never do it. You just won't get them doing it, and we did. They did a great job.
So leadership skills transcend any culture, transcend any particular country of origin. They're all the same, irrespective of where you are.
No, culture, it's different. Leadership to succeed in the best possible way is unchangeable. But cultures, you've got to approach it in a very thoughtful way, because each culture is very, very different priorities, different thought processes, different psychologies. But as humans, we respond to the same. There's nothing more inspiring to see a man challenge danger and overcome it. It just moves us. We feel it viscerally in our gut. So there are some common elements, but in terms of communicating it, you've got to be careful. But anyway, I came back from the UAE, came back to Oz, and I saw the parlous state it was in. Everything that was important, everything I thought I'd been working for most of my life, was falling apart. It wasn't the place it was. We'd lost a lot. We'd made some good gains, but we were in trouble. And once again, Australia has everything it needs to succeed in this land, on this planet, by leadership. And I just had to throw my hat in the ring. And I'm running as a Australian Conservatives Senate candidate at the next federal election, New South Wales. So we'll see how we go. Improve the leadership in Canberra, get down to work, get Australia back to work, clear the red tape, the regulation, lower the taxes, and just let everybody get free. Be free. Go produce. Be productive. Make millions. Create wealth. Create employment. We can do it.
We can do it, can we?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think a lot of things will need to change in Canberra if that's the case. But I'm not going to go into it too much. But there's a podcast I recorded a little while ago, which was not long after the leadership spill. And I live in Kirribilli. I've had 5 prime ministers in 5 years. It's embarrassing what's going on. But hopefully, under some new leadership, it'll help change things, because Australian taxpayers are crying out for good leadership. They want to know that our country's in safe hands. I think sometimes it gets clouded by a lot of the skullduggery of politics, rather than putting the intent where it needs to be, and that's making sure that we as a nation continue to thrive and evolve, because a lot of opportunities here, particularly in the defence industry. So, Ricardo, I've enjoyed the chat. Is the family right behind the political aspirations? Do they know what's sort of potentially coming their way?
Oh, absolutely. The wife's sick of me yelling at the TV set, so she's more than happy for me to go to Canberra and yell at them directly. Well,
there's some good examples of ex-military people who have done well in the Senate. So, it's they bring their own particular brand and flavour of getting stuff done. So I think it's good to have diversity across our political parties. But we'll watch this space and see how you get on. But thank you. I think you covered off a lot of really good points, and to crystallise those 5 points around leadership, I think, irrespective of who you are and what you're doing, if you're tuning into this podcast, it's all very relevant. And myself as a leader, I always think about what I can do better. So it's good to be self-reflective. So thank you.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And stay in touch. Let us know how you're getting on, and we'll get you on again, and we can have a chat about potentially some more politically charged topics and issues. So
absolutely.
Nice one. Thanks for joining us today. Remember to check out defenceconnect.com.au. If you're not yet subscribing to our morning newsletter, so the first to know what's going on in defence and defence industry, defenceconnect.com.au/subscribe. We're also right across social media as well. So go and track us down. You can find out what we're up to. We'll be back again next time. Until then, bye-bye.